Hey everybody, it's David Kemp. I'm your host of Highway to Health podcast. We appreciate you being here. You know, if you followed this podcast, you understand that our whole purpose is to celebrate, give a platform to the people, the organizations that are committed to improving access, experience, and outcomes for our patient population. And on this show, we've had some of the best. And we've talked about topics like revenue, reimbursement, revenue cycle. We've talked to med device companies. We've talked to all kinds of businesses, to organizations that cover the healthcare spectrum. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is at the top of our minds for a lot of reasons, a lot of current events. And I think you'll be touched by the story. I think you'll be inspired by the progress we're making. And I want to introduce you to Johnny Crowder.
I hear you talking when I walk by.
He's the founder CEO of Cope Notes, and he's perfect for this podcast because he embodies exactly what we celebrate. I'm honored to have him. Johnny, thank you for being here. Welcome to Highway to Health.
Heck yeah, I love the intention here. This is cool.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate your story, and also respect the courage to share and to educate our community, our population at scale. And so, thank you for being here. And this is gonna be great. It's gonna also be a lot of fun. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I've got a question for you before we get into business. But you've got an awesome background, and I want our audience, I want our listeners to understand a little bit about Johnny Crowder.
Yeah, I wish I understood more about him. I'm getting to know him a little bit better every day. He's a pretty interesting guy from what I can tell, but I spent the first probably 25 years of my life despising myself, just really unhealthy patterns, multiple different mental health conditions, abusive environments. I mean, when people talk about being dealt a rough hand in life, it looks a lot like the first quarter century of my existence on this planet. So I think what's really cool about the work I get to do now is that I get to use what I've been through for the benefit of other people. So the way I've always looked at life is either these terrible things happened to me for nothing, like there's no rhyme or reason, there's no purpose, it just sucks, there's no redemption, no redeeming qualities, or I can use them to create something that I couldn't have created without those experiences. And faced with those two options, I've chosen to write music about mental health, to write keynotes and trainings about mental health, to write articles and books, and just put as much creative effort into redeeming those things that I've been through as possible. And most recently, over the past 6 or 7 years, it's been taking the form of a company called Cope Notes, where we provide daily mental health support for people like me all over the world.
I've got a portion of our conversation devoted to being uniquely positioned or uniquely qualified for a calling. And the more I learned about your story, that's all I could think about was everything happens for a reason. As individuals, we have to take responsibility for finding that reason sometimes. And it's clear that you have. And man, there's going to be no limit to the lives that you touch and impact because you found your reason and you're using it for good. And so we'll get into that even more a little later. But this is a question that's become one of my favorites. And it's been awesome to learn from some of the executives that we've had on this show. You're a busy guy. You've got a million things going on. But going back to that personal responsibility, we have to find a way to keep ourselves physically, mentally strong so that we can perform at a high level for the ones that we love, but also for the ones that we work with and work around. So if you don't mind, share a personal habit, something that you've implemented in your life to maintain and improve that mental and physical well-being.
Something that, so I'm a big exercise person. I exercise usually about an hour a day. But
What kind of exercise? I noticed the running shoes in the back. I'm a shoe guy.
Yeah, so I'm a big sneaker nerd. We'll have a whole separate podcast about that. But yeah, I have a bike behind me also, so I ride my
Yep.
bike whenever I can. I play pickleball quite a bit. I'm actually not too bad now. It took me a while. I'm not like naturally a sports person, so I've kind of gotten my sea legs on the pickleball court. But I've been doing weight training for a long time, and the way I look at exercise for me, for a long time, I think I understood exercise through the lens of it being like a punishment, or like, get down and give me 10. It feels like using your body is something that you do because you've done something bad, and now this is your way of achieving penance or something. And then I started working more in the health field and spending a lot more time with people who have disabilities. And I was like, whoa, using my body is like a freedom. I can't believe I can ride a bike. I can't believe I can lift weights. I can't believe I can play pickleball or even just go and walk. So now I try to set aside time for that every day. And it's interesting. It really doesn't feel like an obligation, like, ugh, I got to go work out. It feels like a privilege that I get to exercise, and I want to get to exercise that privilege as often as possible, because I know that I sleep better when I exercise. I have better regulation in my moods. So I turn to exercise, not necessarily, I don't lift weights every single day. I don't play pickleball every single day, but some form of physical activity each day. I think what it's done for my brain and my body is transformative, and I no longer view it as as something I have to do, but something I get to do.
Yeah. Wow. That's, I have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, and the older 3 are of that age where, they see myself and their mom moving and, working out a little bit, playing sports, whatever. And it's become kind of a habit. They've been immersed in it since they were kids, but that's something that we talk a lot about is we're blessed to have the able, capable bodies that we have. And, if somebody is unfortunate and not have, the legs, the arms, whatever, the ability, they would give almost anything for that. And so it's a beautiful way to look at it. It's so true.
David, they'd give almost anything for one bike ride.
Yeah.
For one walk, for one gym session, for one game of pickleball. Like, that's what we lose sight of. We go to the gym 100 times and we forget. People would kill to do it once. The workout that you want to skip, they would kill to get to take that in your place,
I need that playing in my headphones at about 5 a.m. every morning, because you're exactly right. And what a great reminder it is to us that we're blessed, man.
Yeah.
Better than we deserve. That's how we've got it. Better than we deserve. You mentioned physical activity helping regulate, your mood. Talk a little bit about that and how the mental side of things, or the physical side of things, impacts the mental side of things for you personally in a positive way.
Yeah, I'm actually embarrassed to admit how long it's taken me to understand the connection between physical and mental health. Like, your brain is an organ. I feel so dumb. Like, why did I have to go to school for psychology to study this stuff when I could have literally just used my noggin? Like, come on. It is just like drinking water helps your brain. Breathing deeply helps your brain. This is basic stuff. And we sort of we revere it as rocket science. Like, I don't know what would make me feel better. This is going to sound like a tangent, but I'll keep it short. I listened to this interview with this private physician, and he's like one of the most highest paid, like they'll fly him out to work for like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. He does like the house calls for these people. So they'll like send a private jet for him and take him right to this billionaire's home. And they tell the physician what's going on. And the physician is like, they were interviewing him about what's it like. And he's like, honestly, it feels really silly because I went to school for like 18 years to tell grown men to drink less caffeine and sleep better. and exercise and drink less alcohol. Like he's like, I almost feel like it's a waste of like, I'm one of the best. He didn't say I'm one of the best, but he really is one of the best doctors in the world. And his talent is wasted on like basic things that we should all know. So when I look,
Things we learn in kindergarten.
yeah. So when I look at exercise for me, I think, I grew up with some really serious anger issues. I had this idea of what it looks like to be a man. I had all the wrong examples set for me. So I associated masculinity with punching things and slamming doors and raising your voice and intimidating people and just this like macho man mentality that I was surrounded by. And as a result, I had a really poor internal triage system for emotion where like almost everything would be routed straight to anger or just I never learned how to channel that energy, which is actually usable. And now I look at music, I look at exercise, these things that might appear aggressive. Like if I'm lifting a weight, I might be making a face like, oh, but I'm not actually angry. It's just like a healthy channel through which I can route distress or frustration or anything like that. And I genuinely feel calm. Everybody who exercises knows this. When they leave, you let go of stuff when you leave the gym. Like you leave stuff in the gym. I leave and go, you know what? That conversation earlier with that employee, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Or that conversation with that client where they said this thing that made me feel some type of way, I should just get over it. Like it helps me just lay everything down because I put that energy somewhere.
Oh, that's good. For me, it's a sense of accomplishment, where when I walk into the gym, I know it's probably not going to be easy. There's probably going to be, a challenge that I got to work through. Most of the time it's a mental challenge, of I've got a lot of work I need to work, go get done, or, I feel like I'm missing out on something else. So mentally I get over that hurdle. Physically, obviously, there's a challenge there when working out. But when you walk out, it feels like, man, I did something today that made me better. And there's a sense of accomplishment that helps me, especially when I do it early in the morning. I see, you mentioned the bike and the shoes in the background. I see the guitars in the background too. Mm-hmm. Creating music has to give you some sense of accomplishment as well, where you've created, at the end of it, you've created something beautiful and something new. How has music helped you with that, mental well-being and, emotional stability?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a middle child. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and they both have kids. And I don't want kids. I've not wanted kids for a long time. And they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, how could you not want to create a life that is like that you can then sow into and just having that thing that's bigger than you? And I'm like, man, for me, that's everything I do creatively gives me that. Like when I write a song, I created something that didn't exist that will touch people and impact lives that I can invest in. I have that relationship with creativity, and I look at music as this sort of alchemy. Like I've been through, David, my life has been so bad that people pay me and fly me to where they live to tell them about how bad my life was on a big stage in front of a bunch of people. So many difficult things have happened to me. And I think, how can I take those things and transform them into something that could never have been created by somebody who didn't go through those things? So I like music in part because, harmony is my love language. I love rhythms and patterns. I've been playing guitar since I was a kid. I'm a writer. Like I like creating stuff. I like performing stuff. I like entertaining people. And all of those things are true of other music fans. But I think if I really want to get like deeply analytical and introspective about why music speaks to me, it's nothing makes me feel more powerful than taking something that was potentially either neutral or what feels like it was intended for evil, something that was absolutely destructive and ruinous in my life, and creating something that people say, that song saved my life, or that song changed my marriage. Or I remember when I was going through this, my brother passed away and I listened to that song 150 times and it helped me get through planning his funeral. Like when you hear stuff like that, David, you go, music, yes, it is harmony. Yes, it is melody. Yes, it is rhythm and pattern and culture, but it's something so much deeper than that.
I wish I had musical talent. I really respect and appreciate music, and really, you can probably tell from my voice and my accent, I love country music. But I really enjoy all kinds of music. And to me, and I'm a big sports guy, and to me, it's sports and music have this composition to them that takes multiple disparate elements, people, instruments, and then when they all come together for the same purpose, something bigger than the sum of the parts is accomplished. And that parallel between sports and music, I think, is why I enjoy them both. Now, I'm more I don't know if gifted is the right word, but I have more talent in one area than the other, but I definitely see how those two things, and bringing multiple elements that have their own talents, their own abilities, but when you bring them all together in the right way, how something beautiful can be accomplished. And we're going to share some of your music with our listeners, and I know they'll enjoy it because I have. And so let's get into a little bit about, not necessarily the business side of things, but how you're going to deliver support and education to the community that you serve. We know that mental health challenges, disorders, whatever term you want to use, they don't discriminate. People of all ages, genders, race, ethnicities are impacted in a certain way. It seems to me that would be a very tough task to tackle. I want you to answer how important flexibility is when delivering support to this community. But first, how did you get over that overburdening feeling of so many different types of people with so many different types of challenges? How did you feel confident enough that you could help at scale for this community?
I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. So I have Save Them tattooed on my knuckles. I'm not sure if you can see.
That's cool.
And my whole life I've been saying, like, I want to save the world. Like, that's been my dream. Like, if you ask me when I'm a kid, what do you want to do when you grow up? It's like, I'm going to save the world. I also probably said, I'm going to be a rock star. But I was like, I'm going to save the world through being a rock star. Like, my whole growing up, my hero was Captain Planet. And it was because he didn't just save certain people who were in distress. He just thought so big. Like, I'm going to save the whole freaking planet. I loved that. And I think it's actually presented a challenge as I've created a business, because you are forced with this ugly realization that not everybody needs what you're selling. Not everybody will like what you have to say or how you say it. Not everybody will like your brand. Not everybody can afford your product. Some people will actually, the opposite problem, they'll think your product is too cheap. And so they want something more premium. So you're always going to be to this or not enough that for somebody. And it's actually, what I've had to do is really focus on positioning my heart to be, I'm creating this for everybody, and then allowing only certain people to take me up on the offer. That's actually pretty challenging. When you create something, you're like, I want everybody and their grandma to be using this. And you have to internally make peace with the fact that 90% of people, like this water bottle, looks pretty unassuming. Plain black water bottle. It's like, what is there not to like? I'm sure if you go to the Amazon page, there's a bunch of people, this water bottle won't fit into the cup holder of my bicycle. And it's like, well, then get a new cup holder or get a different bottle. Like there's a million different variations. And for me, I really started caring about who I call the in-betweeners. And this is what really helped me focus on like, who exactly am I expecting to pick up this offer? I'm saying it's for everybody, but who do I expect to accept that offer? I call them the in-betweeners. So there's I'm making these statistics up just for the sake of this conversation. There's 5% of people who live in a constant state of crisis. They are in need of immediate support from real clinicians. This was me for much of my life. Multiple diagnoses, self-harming, a risk to self and others. There's a percentage of people who are in this category, and a lot of resources are built for them, which is great, by the way. I think they do deserve help and resources. I spent a lot of my life in this category, and I thank God there was help for me. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's 5% of people who are in la la land. Like their parents are rich and happily married, and they do what they want for work, and they have a great work-life balance, and they have a wonderful relationship, and they have 2.5 kids and a dog and a picket fence, and they have everything's going well for them. No health issues or anything. And they actually don't need resources. Everything's going great. They've never had a bad day in their lives. I've never met someone in this category, but I'm assuming that it exists out there. And then there's the 90% of people in the middle who know they're not in crisis, but know they're not feeling perfect. Know they're not at immediate risk to themselves or other people, and they might not need immediate clinical intervention, but also they've been stressed or depressed, or they've been going through some grief, or they're having some kind of issue. And those are the people that I'm passionate about, because a lot of focus is placed on the other two groups. We place a lot of focus on the richest, happiest, most good-looking people in the world who have no problems. That's all over our TVs. And then we see the darkest, gloomiest, we see calamity. And that's also on TV. What we don't see are the in-betweeners. And I'm like, that's who my heart is after. It's the people who aren't 100% this or 100% that. They're somewhere in the middle.
It's a big population, though.
It is.
So how do you address, and there's a lot of variance, right, within that in-betweener community. So how important is flexibility to Cope Notes, and how do you achieve it?
Yeah, I'll say that when I first started Cope Notes, my plan was everybody kept asking me to create different libraries. So there'd be a library for firefighters, and then there'd be a library for moms who had a child pass away. And then there would be a library for people living with a non-fatal cancer or a non-terminal cancer. And everyone wanted their own group. And I'm like, dude, if I do this, first of all, it's going to be absolutely impossible to maintain. Like everyone's going to need their own group. And second of all, those are big swings to assume that like everybody who has had a child pass away is going to need to hear the same thing. And it's actually the same size of swing as assuming that a firefighter can't hear the same message as someone living with cancer and not feel the same benefit. So rather than trying to create a bunch of individual libraries that would be making a huge assumption that all people in that category need to hear the same thing, I was like, if I'm already going to have to make that huge assumption, why don't I focus all the content on less on diagnoses and more on the common stressors and habits and triggers and experiences that are part of the human condition, and pray to God that by doing that, I can help the firefighter and the mom and the person living with cancer. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of things in health are this way. For example, my toothbrush, David, knows nothing about my teeth, doesn't know the first thing about my teeth. And I just went for a dental checkup, and my dentist said, "You're doing an outstanding job. I don't see plaque buildup. I don't see anything. What's the secret?" And I'm like, "Brother, I brush my teeth and floss." And this is cheap toothbrush, cheap floss. And it's a reminder that in an era of over personalization where everything is like custom tailored for us. Some things really don't have to be in order to be effective.
You're almost looking at the true sense of humanity. I mean, your teeth, different from my teeth, but they need certain things, regardless if they're mine or yours. People are similar in that way, where a lot of us are built with similar needs. And when we're, especially for this in-betweener group, it's one of those needs that's not getting met that leads to, probably, some of these unhealthy thoughts and feelings and behavior. What have you learned about humanity, through this exercise, through this journey?
That's a great question. I think about this constantly. Whenever I see somebody, like yesterday, I'm at the airport flying home. I go into the bathroom stall I'm using a urinal. So it's like a wall of urinals. And a guy walks up and uses the urinal next to mine, even though there's a spare urinal. Like he could have, whenever I go to a urinal, I make sure there's a urinal open between the next person. And he just didn't. And there were other urinals there. And I spent 10 minutes wondering, like, I have so many questions for this guy. Like, and I wasn't upset, wasn't mad, didn't say anything, but I'm just like, what a curious decision. I wonder, I want to talk to him. I want to know, like, what happened or what he was thinking, or obviously didn't go up to him. But I spent a lot of my time thinking about why people do the things they do. And I read this awesome book that I'd strongly recommend. It's called The Art of Happiness. And this book, first of all, a friend gave it to me. I thought it was the corniest title in the world. Didn't read it for like 10 years. And I wish to God I read it 10 years earlier. I finally picked it up and read it. And it posits, part of what the book talks about is it posits that people only do things for one of two reasons. They are either moving towards pleasure or away from pain. So they're either trying to seek a positive experience or to run away from a negative experience. And as I look at people, I see this more and more as a universal truth. When we, for example, even when we, like, why build a business? It's to experience the positive experience of helping other people, which fills my heart, and to avoid the negative experience of suffering of people who don't have help. Yeah, I'm telling you, if you look at, like, why did I grab a Coca-Cola? It's like because I like how it feels to drink Coca-Cola and I'm thirsty. So that's the positive. And then I'm trying to avoid the feeling of being thirsty when I don't have something to drink and my mouth gets dry. So the older I get and the more I experience these interactions with people all over the world as I travel, the more I'm like, people actually do have these shared basic drives, even if they express themselves in different way. And it actually makes me feel less isolated from people and more a part of, like, the human community.
We're not all as different as it seems.
No.
And there's, like you said, there's reassurance in that. This over-personalization that you alluded to earlier, I immediately bucked that trend. I'm like, you don't know me. And so there's almost some pushback on solutions, products that are over-personalized. Because if you might think I fit in a bucket, but I probably don't, But in reality, at a higher level, man, we're a lot alike. And we have the basic needs that majority of other people do. And there's actually comfort in that. I'm glad you said it, because it's like you and I, we can relate. We've never met, and we can relate. We come from very different backgrounds. We can still relate. And when we can relate, we can build a relationship. And it tears down some walls and creates community, which I think we all look for, even in the worst of times, maybe even especially in the worst of times, we look for community. I mean, when the economy's bad, are the churches more full or less full? They're more full.
I always tell people whenever I speak at a conference, and especially if there's kids, like if I'm doing like a youth thing, just because I think it's funny, but I tell them, like, if you ever feel alone, I want to do some quick trivia for you. Like, if you feel you're so different and you're so unique, that nobody else can share, no one else understands what you're going through. And by the way, I felt like this for a lot of my life. I thought, like, therapy won't help me. I'm different. Or, like, I'm not going to tell my mom what I'm going through because she wouldn't understand, stuff like that. And I ask people, I want you to guess the living organism that we share 60% of our DNA with. That's more than half. So we are 60% identical with this living organism. And we hear guesses like, oh, is it a rhesus monkey, or is it a chimpanzee, or is it a gorilla? Do you know the answer, David?
I don't.
It's a freaking banana. We are 60% identical to a banana. Our DNA is. So I tell people, like, the next time you think that you're so different from everybody else, just know that if you sat down with a banana and confided in it, it would understand most of what you told it. Because humans are astronomically identical. We are like 99.9% identical to every other human, DNA wise. That gives me, as someone who's diagnosed with multiple mental health conditions, some of them are quite rare, especially in the early onset. I was exhibiting symptoms as a toddler, like before elementary school, which is also exceedingly rare. So as someone who has felt like almost singled out by my poor luck with health or with abuse or the environment I grew up in, any of it, I think there's still solace in knowing that I'm part of this broader community that, like, still has these basic human drivers. And I know that if I sat down with somebody, even if I disagreed with them on a lot of stuff, there would still be some things where, like, I just was talking to my brother the other day about what it feels like to, if you don't have time to shower, you're between two things, but you just change your underwear. You feel like, oh, at least I changed my underwear. At least I feel like a new man in this moment. And it's like, man, my brother and I are so different, but we connected on that. And it's a silly example of how I think all of us, if we really made an effort, would realize that we're not actually as alone in the challenges that we face. It's just that we never sat down to talk about it with somebody long enough for them to go, I know what you mean.
I couldn't say it better. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little, and editors, cut this out if we need to. I watched you giving a keynote speech, and your shirt said "Jesus loves you" in Spanish. Spiritually, not even religiously, just spiritually. How does that align with humanity at our core? You know, is there a, what with your studies, your research, your experience, is there a spiritual need at the core of humans?
I personally believe so. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase "a God-shaped hole" in everyone's heart, where they're like, oh, maybe it's more money, or maybe if only I could go on more dates, or if only, fill in the blank here. And I do think when we're talking about human drive, like what actually drives desire, you and I both know people who smoke cigarettes every single day. And they know, you won't go to them and tell them anything they don't know about cigarettes. They know that it's bad for them. They know it's affecting them, and yet they continue to smoke. There is a yearning inside of all of us. I'm certain that if I watched a documentary about how chocolate is manufactured, like how they harvest the cocoa beans or whatever, I'm sure I would stop eating chocolate. Like, if we actually knew how harmful all these things were, we'd probably stop doing all of them, but then we would still yearn for something. There would be a yearning inside of us. And I personally believe that yearning cannot be satisfied by something finite, because then it will just perpetuate. Once you finish a chocolate bar, maybe you don't want chocolate right now, but let me tell you something, a couple of days later, on this trip I just went on with my family, we were up in Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere Pennsylvania, like the sticks. And there's no restaurants out there besides every restaurant is a pizzeria. We were joking, like we'd drive by and it's like pizza shop, pizza shop, pizza shop. It was one of the only places you could go. So we wound up having pizza like 3 times in 4 days. Just circumstantially, it was like, that's just the way it shook out. And when I was getting on the plane to fly home, I said to my brother, I'm never going to eat pizza again. He and I both know that probably 6 days from now, I will want pizza. And it's sort of it's a way to illustrate that all of us have this infinite yearning for something else, a deeper relationship, a deeper sense of purpose, an understanding, like all of these things we have a yearning for, and that yearning is infinite, but then we take these finite things and we try to fill it, and then a day later the hole is there again and we try to fill it with something else. I think God is the only thing that fits in that hole.
I believe the same, and I think He created us with that purpose, so that we would continually pursue Him. You've shared a little bit about your personal upbringing, the challenges, the tough draw that you were given, and how that uniquely qualifies you for the role that you're playing right now, and the support that Cope Notes is providing this community of patients. Has it helped you through empathy, anticipation? In what way has your personal experience helped you the most address the needs of this community?
I think it's interesting to see mental health tools that come out that are created by clinicians but then reviewed by peers. Because what that typically means is that there's a room full of people who have read about the challenges that their customers face, and they create a solution. And then at the end, or maybe a couple stops along the way, they check with a room full of people to see, is this kind of what you guys had in mind? Do you think this would be good? First of all, I think everybody should do that for the rest of time. I think you should always be asking your customers like whether or not that's the type of thing they'd want to use. But if you look at, and I'm not a product of AA, I'm just using Alcoholics Anonymous as an example. There's a lot of like peer-run, peer-led, peer-created components of AA that create a really interesting level of buy-in where people feel connected, they feel understood. And so I'm a certified recovery peer specialist. And basically that means I use my lived experience with mental illness to support other people who also live with mental illness. That's the easiest way to describe it. I also went to school for psychology, and I did learn things in school for psych that I didn't learn in my lived experience, but the same is true in reverse. So as Cope Notes, as a company, and this is not a requirement to work here, but just the way it panned out, we've exclusively hired people who have firsthand lived experience with mental illness. And it's like, I love that. I love the idea that as we're working on a product that's going to serve people who live with anxiety, depression, bipolar, even people with no diagnoses whatsoever, but experience challenges in their mental and emotional health, I think who better to design the solution than people who searched for a solution and couldn't find one to solve that problem for them. So I'm a big believer in the firsthand lived experience with mental health challenges being our secret weapon as an organization. Because yes, we have a clinical oversight panel. We check with clinicians on stuff. We want to make sure, but rather than having a room full of clinicians build something and check with peers to make sure it's going to work for them, we flip it. So the peers are actually doing the building and the clinicians are doing the checking.
It's almost, if the clinicians are building it and then getting it peer reviewed, not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's almost an element of like leading the witness, right? It's almost like giving it something to the peers and it'd be hard to disagree with something that's scientifically or clinically backed. And then they'd probably, those peers would probably be like, yeah, I mean, I guess if that was available, I'd use it. But it's not original to the person who's gone through that experience. And then reviewed or checked or approved by a clinician or a doctor of some kind, a scientist of some kind. And so I like the way you've flipped that. And I mean, even not to harp on this, but even biblically, it's those that went through it are usually the ones handpicked to lead others through a similar challenge. And so I believe it also breeds a ton of authenticity, trust, and credibility by the people that you're serving, which is an important element, I would assume.
Yeah, I think about it this way. This always gets a big laugh whenever I'm doing a keynote about like accessibility, for example. I say, like, can you imagine what it was like for me being 20 years old, filling out an intake form, and having that form ask to rank my severity of my OCD symptoms on a scale of 1 to 7. Guys, I have OCD. I can only pick 4. That's the only safe number. I'm not allowed to put any other number because my OCD won't let me. It's like those things that we don't consider.
Right.
About the patient experience, about the customer experience. When you have peers in a room discussing these things, you hear stuff and you go, man, I never would have thought of that. But someone else goes, well, of course you haven't, because you haven't filled out one of these forms when you needed help. But I have, and I remember doing that, and this is what was frustrating about it. So, for example, with Cope Notes, it is one of the only, might be the only, but I'll say one of the only mental health resources that collects no PHI, no protected health information. So you're talking no names. It's not linked to your health records. It's not linked to your employer. It's not linked to your insurance. We don't have people's ages, not even their demographic data. And the reason why is because we served a lot of people, especially early on, who were either ex-military. They were, and they had all sorts of reasons to care about their privacy. We served people in witness protection. We served people in the foster program who had, data that was sensitive. We then, we started serving a lot of governments, which we still do today. We serve youth. You want a bunch of teenagers, first and last names and health information, links on the internet? Probably not. So we've gone to such great lengths. Even I grew up with paranoid schizophrenia. So if I'm going to fill out a form, do I want to put a bunch of my health information into it on the internet? No. So we wanted to make it like as easy as possible for those people. And that's how we approach, I'd say, almost everything at Cope Notes is like, how do we consider the ease with which someone can engage with this? And how do we make it easy to do the right thing, which is prioritize your mental health long-term?
One of the rare instances where accessibility breeds security. Let's make it easy for somebody to use, and also more secure for anybody looking to, be a bad actor, because we don't have it anyway. We don't have that information anyway. That's brilliant.
That's actually what we say, David, in our presentations. Whenever we work with like big organizations, we say we figured the best way to protect your information was to not collect it in the first place. I love it.
It's true. It's great. We've talked about a lot. You've been gracious with your time. If somebody were, to take what we've talked about today and walk away understanding one thing, what would that one thing be for you? What do you want them understanding and remembering from our conversation?
I have so many different ways I want to answer this question, but I'm going to pick one. The fact that you, the person listening to this, have spent 45 minutes of your life on this planet listening to this podcast should tell you that this is an interest, that you're curious about this. There's something inside of you that's like, yeah, I want to learn more about mental health. I want to learn more about improving the way that I feel, the way that I behave, my relationships with other people, my quality of life. Fan that flame. I challenge you right now. If you're listening to this, I challenge you, rather than putting your phone down after you finish this, or rather than turning on music, choose another podcast or TED Talk or find an audiobook. Like, just don't let this podcast be, oh yeah, I listened to a podcast where they talked about mental health. Let this be a springboard to at least one other piece of media that can continue this conversation, because I promise you that for every person who can rattle off fantasy football stats, there is 0.000001 person who knows what they can do to improve their mental and emotional health. And the difference between those two people is not intelligence. It is curiosity. And I encourage you to take the last 45 minutes of you listening to this, interpret that as evidence that you have a curiosity about mental health, and feed that curiosity now, not tomorrow. Like, when this podcast ends, pick a new one and continue learning. It'll change your life.
Intentional curiosity. Johnny, thank you.
I feel grateful to be here for this, and I hope that everyone listening feels like fired up to go do something to improve their mental and emotional health. It's the one investment I think you'll never regret.
Agreed. And we appreciate you being here. We'll talk to you soon.
Count on it.